Hello, today we'll learn about the physics of flight. How do airplanes take off and sustain safe travel? What are aerodynamics and fluid dynamics, and what do they have in common? And today we'll cover the Bernoulli principle and Newton's three laws of motion. And at the end we'll apply the collective gathered knowledge to a hands-on activity where we'll create our own flying objects to test. So what is a force? Can anyone share some examples and take a guess? They should answer variety. A force is simply a push or a pull. Magnets and gravity are examples of natural forces around us. We know about gravity thanks to Isaac Newton. Isaac Newton was a physicist, mathematician, astronomer, and author who has studied and identified many important scientific principles and ideas. He was the guy who discovered gravity and created his three laws of motion, named after himself. Newton's three laws of motion help us to understand the world around us. Newton's three laws of motion are as follows, and we will explain them better in a moment, so don't worry. Law 1 states that objects that are at rest tend to stay at rest, and those that are in motion tend to stay in motion unless acted on by an outside force. Law 2 states that applying the same amount of force to two objects at different masses gets two different rates of acceleration. And Law 3 states that for every action there is an equal but opposite reaction. To understand these ideas, we will look at some examples. Law 1 states that objects that are at rest tend to stay at rest, and objects in motion tend to stay in motion unless acted on by an outside force. Can anyone share an example of this principle at work? They're going to give some examples, talk about it for a second. So some examples include riding in a car. When the driver hits the brakes quick and you are thrown forward against your seatbelt. The passengers, the moving objects, were in motion, so they will tend to stay in motion. The brakes and the seatbelts are the outside forces that act on the moving objects to slow and stop the passenger's inertia. Inertia is the property that describes the tendency of matter to stay at rest or to stay in motion. And that's why we wear seatbelts, because without them your body continues to move forward while the rest of the car is stopping, and you can be thrown from your seat. The same idea can be seen with a soccer ball that's kicked and stopped by a net or by two people pushing on a box. So when two people are pushing on opposite sides of a box with equal force, they are balanced and the box remains at rest. So when two people are pushing on a box together on one side, they act as the outside force, making the box go into a state of motion. Many factors act to slow down objects in motion. When we picture something moving and tending to keep moving, and we look at normal situations, there are many invisible forces acting. Once a car begins to move, the engine continues to supply power for it to keep moving, and because the outside forces like wind resistance hitting the car slow you down, the brakes when you stop, and gravity even plays into the speed of the car. There are many types of forces all around us. Law 2 states that applying the same amount of force to two objects of different masses can give you two different rates of acceleration. It takes different amounts of force for objects that are different masses to move at the same rate. The boy with the large rock is working harder to move his rock, and the boy with the little rock can tug lightly at the rope and get it to move. You can also display this by lining balls of different masses up next to each other and kicking them with the same amount of force, and you can watch and see how far each one goes. Law 3 states that for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. When a ball bounces, the action of the ball in motion hitting the floor has an equal but opposite reaction of bouncing back up, or releasing an untied balloon and it shoots through the air. The air shooting out is the action, and the balloon is reacting by flying in the opposite direction through the air. Magnets are a natural force that surrounds us. Magnets are a force because of their magnetic field. Their magnetic field is what allows them to exert a force on other objects without even touching them. Magnets have a north and a south pole. When two magnets of opposite poles are near each other, they pull together, and when two of the same pole are near each other, they will repel or push away. So gravity is another natural force around us. Does anyone know how gravity was discovered? You let them answer and see if anyone knows the legend. So Isaac Newton discovered gravity. The legend goes, one day he was reading under an apple tree. Some say he was dozing off, but while he was under the tree, an apple fell on his head, and he wondered what made that apple fall, not just detach itself from the tree, but why is it pulled down to the ground and onto his head. This led to the discovery of the force of gravity. And another scientist who is important to the understanding of flight and forces is Daniel Bernoulli. Daniel Bernoulli was a Swiss scientist who was a mathematician and physicist. He is remembered for his work with fluid dynamics and is a pioneer in probability and statistics. The Bernoulli principle created by and named after him. This deals with the conservation of energy, which applied mathematics to mechanism with carburetors and airplane wings. We will look at how Bernoulli principle describes the physics behind an airplane wing and how we will get the lift that allows airplanes to fly. So fluid dynamics is the study of fluids at rest and at motion, and aerodynamics is the study of moving air and the solid bodies flying through it. Bernoulli's study of fluid dynamics concluded that as the speed of a fluid increases, then the pressure decreases. The example shows an airplane wing. The air flows from one end of the wing to the other at the same rate, but the wings are designed to be curved on the top to force the air to move faster. Following fluid dynamics, this faster moving air creates a pocket of low pressure, and the bottom of the wing has much less resistance, so the air travels underneath slower, and this creates a high pressure pocket underneath. So how does this difference in pressure create the lift? Bernoulli's study of fluid dynamics also states that fluids move from areas of high pressure to areas of low pressure. So we said that the curve on the top creates a low pressure area by forcing the air to move faster around the curve. And we also said that the lower side creates a high pressure area because it offers less resistance, allowing the air to move slower across the wing. So, if a fluid moves from high pressure to low pressure, then the air would travel across the wing and push upwards as the air moves from the high pressure underneath the wing to the low pressure area above the wing. This is how airplanes can take flight and sustain travel through the air. A great way to remember these properties is flip the ship. So flip the ship is FLP, SHP. These stand for faster, lower pressure, and slower, higher pressure. So remember, just flip the ship, and you're sure to remember this important principle. It's not always fun to learn about things by being talked at, so let's see some flip the ship physics in action. So world record holder for throwing the farthest paper airplane and paper plane design expert John Collins loves to teach others about how to create and throw paper airplanes that can fly fast and far. He explains that the main 4 aerodynamic forces are drag, thrust, gravity, and lift. Drag is the wind resistance that slows the thrust of the engine, while gravity is always at work on all matter on Earth, so we must factor the downward pull and tendency for the plane to rest on the ground with the counteracting lift, the physics of which we covered with Bernoulli's principle. These are all factors in creating your own flying paper airplane. Today you will make your own flying paper planes to test out. We'll go over how to make a basic airplane, follow along with these steps, or look at your handout that goes along with the activity. And then they'll spend time going through this with them, and then they'll spend 20 minutes testing them out and actually building other ones.